Welcome everyone to my April 8th, 2025 webinar called Adventures in Energy Healing. I felt inspired to do this one because the last, I think, 4 months, my webinars have been dealing with energy tangles, and those are much more on the level of psychology. Well, the energy is on the subtle level, but the manifestation is on the level of psychology. It was helping people get clear about things and how to deal with how to recognize that they're in an energy tangle and how to deal with it because it's such a nice way to process it. It's so easy on the heart. Um, we don't have to beat ourselves up or anything or do a great deal of introspection. It just what comes to us is our status of, oh, I care about this, I'm concerned about that, and beginning to realize that, oh, I'm those things have energy that are causing me to mix my thoughts and my emotions together in ways that which keep me basically stuck. And so the whole point of all of those talks was about how to find our way out of those tangles and how to get unstuck so that we can live happy, healthy, and productive lives. But more recently, my actual work, the work I'm doing with clients, has been more pure energy work and has not been dealing with the energy tangles that have produced stuff. I've had a number of very interesting, I'm going to say it in the medical way of saying it, interesting cases that have really inspired me and excited me to see what I can do and the results that can be achieved. It's been most gratifying. So I thought I'd turn to the adventures I've been having in energy healing as the topic for tonight's presentation. Um, when I talk about doing energy healing in that way, what I'm talking about is dealing with the energy that underlies the physical, mental, emotional, and or spiritual discomforts that we have, diseases that we have. We don't call them diseases because that's a medical level of consideration. It's more on the gross level of psychology and physiology. But it's a disease, it's uncomfort that we have with our status of which we call health. And it's mental health and physical health and emotional health, spiritual well-being. So what I'd like to do tonight is just give some examples of some of the stuff I've been doing, and in doing that, explain a little bit about how I work with people. Um, Now, I've probably many of you have heard me say that one of the surprising and quite fun things that I do is to work with dental abscesses, uh, you know, toothaches. And those are usually what they call periapical, meaning around the base of the root in the bone of the jaw, upper or lower jaw. And they can be very painful. And if you go to a dentist, they will almost always say that you need a root canal. So they get in, they drain out the pus, they put you on antibiotic typically also, and then they fill the entire root of the tooth so that it's no longer, that part of it is no longer alive. Um, and it's a very successful way of going about it generally. Percentage of success is quite high, and it brings relief to people fairly quickly. As soon as the pressure is relieved, it feels a lot better. Um, it was no accident that when I was doing this kind of work, occasionally people would say, "Oh, I got this toothache and it's bothering me. Gonna have to go see a dentist." And I would typically say, "Well, let me work on it a couple of times here over the next day or so, and let's see if you don't get better. Maybe you don't need to get the root canal done." And virtually, I think practically every time, there may have been one time it didn't happen. People found fairly immediate relief and wound up not getting the root canal done and not needing it subsequently because we were able to both stop the infection and promote enough healing that the tooth was going to be okay. Now, if you do an x-ray, I know from experience, if somebody went to the doctor, you can still see the erosion of the bone around the root. but the infection's gone. It's no longer inflamed. They can't see that on X-ray, of course. It's just the person's not having any symptoms anymore. Um, so that was one of those simple little things that I work with. And the basic way I work with that is, that's an immediate physical problem, and my attention will be drawn there usually directly. Sometimes my attention is drawn somewhere else. So it may be that there's some other factor that's involved in producing that toothache, and that could be one of those energy tangle things, and that would be just fine. We just deal with that. But I usually deal with that on the subtle level rather than talking the patient through that. I should say a client, not use the medical jargon there. Talking my client through it. We just deal with it directly on the energy level, and I use various techniques that I have from a wide repertoire of techniques that I've learned. Most of them developed and taught to me by Richard Bartlett from Matrix Energetics, and it's very successful techniques. And he really gave me all the basic principles I've needed to be able to use and apply what I know in just an endless variety of situations. So dental abscesses were one of the things that kind of got me started. But more recently, I've been working with somebody who had a stroke, and if we looked at the MRI, I was able to, because everything's shared online these days, the family was able to provide me with a copy of that, and it was very severe. Um, and I didn't actually start working on the client until about a month after the stroke. It was a hemorrhagic type of stroke. Strokes are of two types, basically, hemorrhagic and obstructive. Obstruction means that the blood supply to some portion of the brain is cut off by a clot, usually. And a hemorrhagic stroke is the kind where a blood vessel breaks and bleeds. And those can be, well, there's a number of kinds that happen, but when there's bleeding into the brain, not only does that mean that the part of the brain that's downstream on that arterial supply, not only is it cut off from its blood supply, but the blood that then is in and around the brain puts pressure on the brain, and that further compromises the blood supply to that area. And so the area can get quite large. Um, and many of those are fatal, of course. But a good number of them are not fatal, but leave the patient quite debilitated. And so I started working with this client about a month after their stroke. And from the very first treatment, which I did remotely, of course, this is not somebody who's in the hospital here. They're actually almost halfway around the world, 2/3 of the way around on the other side. The they began to improve right away, and the family was very pleased to see that the patient who had been lying immobile essentially began to start to move, and within a short period of time, another week or so, was responding nicely to questions and giving ways of indicating that they understood what was going on, and now they're reading a newspaper, which they can only hold with one hand, but they can hold a newspaper and read it, and can put their glasses on. So there's good evidence there that they are improving very nicely, and as our treatment is continuing on a regular basis, I work on them 3 times a week so that we can um, get the maximum possible effect, because time is a wasting, as they say. So it's been a couple of months now from the time of the stroke, and they're coming along. We've got a long ways to go, but they're coming along, and we have every reason to believe that progress will continue, and continue at a rate much accelerated from it would if I were not doing that kind of work. So that's a very exciting, very gratifying case study. And again, my work, as always, it's where my attention goes. So most of the time, my attention goes to the brain, and where the area where the stroke was, but sometimes it goes particularly to the heart, because there's a lot of feeling involved in all of this and in being debilitated. And so, been working on that level also. And then, of course, with all of my clients, pardon me, but particularly with ones who are under a great deal of stress, there's a great drop in energy, bodily energy. And so I have to attend to that. And I have techniques, again, for matrix energetics for stimulating the body's energy system as a whole, and then dealing with any blockages that may exist in the flow of energy through the body. So the work is both very general and very, very specific. And, it's been just very gratifying with this particular client. Now, another client that I'm working with wound up in the hospital with a urinary tract infection, which then got very complicated. And the patient has a significant heart disease, and I believe they are been told that they need a valve replacement. And there's some other work that needs to be done. The kidneys are not good. There's been complications. They got pneumonia from not breathing deeply because they're very weak. They've been lying around and sleeping a great deal, and this is one of the reasons why people who are debilitated like that, may succumb to complications, as they say. So I've been working with that person, dealing with all the different areas of the body that are basically marginal in their functioning. And the client, again, the family is very thrilled. The client has responded very nicely, showing a lot more energy, a lot more wakefulness. And so we're making good progress there. We're still a ways away from having them all fixed up, but this has been a very gratifying bit of work that we're doing. Um, Other kinds of things that I deal with, fractures I've dealt with. I'm not dealing with any right now, but that's been a fairly common thing. I can help have fractures heal more quickly. Urinary tract infections are fairly common problems. And so I deal with that kind of stuff. So those are some of the physical things that I deal with. And I like dealing with physical things for a very personal reason, and that is you get to see results. Physical stuff changes and gets better. The condition of organs and such gets better. And oftentimes there's laboratory values. There are numbers that can be seen so that one can feel very confident, one can feel very convinced that the work that we're doing is producing really tangible results. On the emotional, mental side of things, um, I get a lot of people, a surprising number of people, with sleep disturbances, anxiety, feeling unsettled, brain fog, and poor memory. It's practically epidemic right now. I'm going to clear my throat. Um, Brain fog seems to be particularly common these days, and people also report poor memory. And so I've been working with a number of people, usually, particularly with the clients that I've seen in the past, people I've seen in the past, usually many times. I just need one session with them, but sometimes things will have been out of balance for a good while, and I need like 3 sessions in order to get them fixed up. And for them, it's general settling of the energy of the body. When I look in on them, the energy is like really excited and very volatile, moving around a great deal, and often quite tangled. And so I have to calm it down. So I have techniques that I use to bring down the energy of the body. Bring it. It's not reducing the energy, but organizing it and getting it so it functions coherently, so they can use that energy to be able to function. Um, and most people report, virtually immediate results. They sleep better, the brain fog goes away. memory gets better. Um, People with anxiety, it's all usually a long-standing kind of problem like that, that they just worry, worry, worry. That often takes more than one session to get them settled down. It's just a more advanced state of that. Um, and sleep disturbances, again, depends on how long a pattern that's been established. If it's just a short time and not very well established, in other words, then it responds more quickly. But if it's a long established sleep disturbance, um, that's often complicated by getting people to go to bed early, to go to bed when they're tired, particularly. And so if they're tired at like 8:30 or 9 o'clock, rather than stay up into 10 o'clock and later, where they get more energy because that time of day brings more energy, then if I can get them to go to bed early, then usually it's fairly easy to get the sleep disturbance under control. Um, and a lot of times that's challenged by the fact that when they stay up late, they do things like watch Instagram and YouTube videos and stuff like that, or do other things to keep them busy, even read. And that gets the brain functioning, gets the brain excited. And if they stay up late, then that lateness supports that, and so they wind up oftentimes staying up very, very late. And I have a tendency to do that myself. I have to be fairly well disciplined, self-disciplined, and just say to myself, look, I can enjoy that, but I'll enjoy it tomorrow. Um, and then go to bed. And if I go to bed when I'm tired, I go right to sleep, and then everything's fine. So it's just a wonderful way of dealing with that kind of stuff. Um, so I've had quite a number of people recently who've fallen into this category. They'll blame the planets. They'll say Mercury is retrograde and something is aspecting something else, and so on and so forth. And all of those things just add up to you just need to get settled down. So we settle down the energy, get it organized and functioning so that people can be happy again. Um, when I talk of spiritual well being and spiritual disease, I'm talking about things like existential angst. That means a fundamental fear. Life is not a happy place. That there's not just misery, but there's a fear about it. There can also just be misery, but we call that depression. Um, Dissociative state where people just don't relate to what's going on in their life. Their life is like functioning, but they're not in it. That's what it means to be dissociative. They're not in their life. They're not living their life. It's like it's just going on, and not in a very happy way usually. And it doesn't bring a personal gratification. They're not. Not only are they not attached to it, they're actually detached from it. It's like not connected at all. It doesn't have that integrated quality of a more enlightened state of functioning. And then, of course, there's the identity crises, which can be of all kinds. That can be roles and the economic, what kind of economic financial position you're in, um, gender identity, so on and so forth. All those kind of identity crisis kinds of things are spiritual crises. Um, and I guess it was a few months ago I was working with somebody who really had quite a dissociative state. Uh, Life just wasn't meaningful to them. And it took a lot of work. I had to do a lot of it verbally because I had to get to the mind as well as to the energy. So I was working with both simultaneously to get them to feel again, to feel what life was, to find joy in life, and to find merit and worth in what they were doing and what their life on earth was about. Um, and was quite successful with that, actually. It was very gratifying. Um, it was like they'd forgotten. Now, there are other cases, which I personally have not had to deal with, um, where people cannot make that reconnection again, and they need psychiatric care. Um, but this particular client I'm thinking of was able to find joy once again in life, to find meaning and purpose, so that they could just accept the goodness in their life and let that show up again. Now, when I work with people, I often get the question, well, how many sessions will this take, or how much better is it going to get? And I can't usually answer that question directly because there's always a certain mystery about doing this. I can get a pretty good idea, particularly if I've worked with a client before. I can say, well, 1 session or 3 sessions, or maybe more, you know, or I can say, you have this kind of a, particularly a tangle of energy, and it's due to this and this and this. This is what you told me. Your tangle is due to this and this, and it's going to take quite a while to get that sorted out. And so I've had some people that I've worked with for a large number of sessions, as they begin to get that idea that they can stop and look inside and say to themselves, something inside me feels unhappy in some way, whatever it is. And I'm here with that. I can be with that. And it's okay to feel that. And when they are able to start to do that, they can interrupt that process of attachment that they have to all of this confused feelings. And they can begin to set back and just go, oh, I feel this, and I feel this, and I feel this, and maybe even a fourth thing, or fifth thing even. And they're all competing for attention. And I'm okay with that. I can see that process. And then just giving it attention, let it work itself out so that they're able again to set a direction, make decisions, and take care of things in their life. It's really quite fun to do that with people. But that's not pure energy work, and we wanted to focus on that. Causative factors. So one of them is how strong that particular karma is that is producing that unhappiness. And that's not something that's so easily measured, but we get a sense of it just from the history of what's gone on and how long it's gone on and how much of a problem it is. And very intense karmas are more difficult to alleviate. Whereas, minor karmas, you have an injury and it gets better. And it's going to get better whether you work with me or not. And that's a minor karma. Whereas, you break a leg and you get blood clot in the lung and, or a fat embolus, or, something like that. And then it's more intense karma, and that can be much more difficult to deal with. It doesn't mean it's impossible to deal with. It just makes it more difficult. More time is going to be required. Um, Other areas. Again, how long the disease or discomfort has been present is a factor. Things that have been around for a long time, like years, are very hard to change because the body and the mind believe that this is the way it is. And that in order to do something, it's like you have to rip a band-aid off. You have to do something. You have to operate on something. You have to do some kind of process, um, as opposed to something that's fresh and you go like, oh, that should just be normal. That should be healthy. That injury shouldn't be there. So how long the problem has been present is a significant factor. Whether the problem is genetic or familial in its origin. Um, those kinds of karmas, you might say, are heavy karmas or fixed karmas, severe karmas. They're much more difficult to manage. That does not make them impossible, but there's more to do. And I have to use techniques often that actually deal with the karma itself, change the energy that's around that whole situation. Um, so it's actually quite gratifying work. It's very exciting work, but It makes the work much more difficult. Um, whether the problem is the result of environmental or social factors. Environmental factors include toxins and things like that in the environment, noise, pollution of various kinds, um, temperature, stress, humidity, stress, too high or too low, um, things like that. And then all kinds of social factors that come into play, uh, local and national politics, whether you're in a particular socio-ethnic group or social group that is discriminated against, or things that weigh on people, um, can be big, very powerful factors. And many of those factors we can't actually change the cause, but we can change the response. We can improve the ability of the physiology and the mind to deal with those things and to respond to them and be able to function effectively. Sometimes what's going on with us is related to something in a parallel universe, or is caused by an alien entity. Those are not common. I've shared a couple of those experiences in the past. I haven't had one recently. Um, my favorite story about that is I was working with somebody and I found that there was an alien entity involved in their physiology, and it was holding on kind of back here, the back over the shoulders and the lower neck, and it was holding on very tightly. And I tried everything I knew to get it to let go, and I couldn't get it loose. So I called upon help from the natural powers of the universe to help me get rid of this entity. And there was a flash of lightning outside the building where I was working, and an instantaneous tremendous crash of thunder. There was so much energy, and I felt like the whole energy of the room was just swept clean. And when things quieted down, took a few seconds, the entity was gone. It just vanished. So that was one of the more dramatic cases. I haven't had very many of those, but they're kind of fun when they show up, and I get to do things that help out. Typically, what I do with an entity is persuade it that it's not actually getting what it's trying to get. Um, and so it's being a sucker, if you will, a leech, trying to steal from someone. And I can try to, I've been successful a few times persuading the entity to let go and no longer hold on to a person. And that's been quite successful. Um, and then one other factor that's kind of really important, and that is whether the person really truly wants to learn whatever lesson this dis-ease is causing them and holds for them in order to be free of the karma. They have to really want to learn what that lesson is. Most people, it's just they want to get well. It's not that they're trying to learn anything. They just want to get well. And sometimes it's clear when I go to work with them that there is a lesson involved, and that if they're not going to learn the lesson, then they're going to continue to suffer. And I've had that show up with people with some serious chronic disorders, and they just were holding on to something, usually a resentment of some kind, some anger at somebody, some resentment about something, and they just wouldn't forgive. They just wouldn't forgive. And so sometimes I have to work with a client. I use the Ho'oponopono technique. If you know what that is, that's great. If you don't, I'm not going to try to explain it, but it's a very simple technique that is intended to relieve guilt and attachment to misery. Um, and it can be used very effectively, very successfully. And it's great when you're holding a lot of resentment towards something, and you know have a lot of negative energy directed outward like that, which you're also directing inward, then the Ho'oponopono technique is able to clear that out and free that up. So it isn't always necessary. I'm going to say this now before we head into the group clearing session. It isn't always necessary to know what the causative factor type is, what type of causative factor it is. You don't have to know whether it's a strong karma or not. But it can be helpful. It can be very helpful to see, oh, yes, this is something that's coming from my family, and there's a pattern here, and I'm going to have to break that pattern. I'm going to have to shift the energy within me around that. And when I do that, then that'll begin to shift the energy within the family system because the families operate like systems. Individuals are interconnected. And so when one person changes, then others all change to some degree. So it's very very beautiful approach. But again, just to summarize, the energy work that I do, I feel very privileged to be able to do it. I spent a lot of time developing a level of awareness that I was able to perceive the energy and work with it, and feel very fortunate that I ran into Richard Bartlett and Matrix Energetics, where I learned most, but not all, but most of what I know about energy work. And I had some wonderful people help me along the way, some of them local here in Fairfield and others remotely, um, to help me develop my abilities. Um, Very grateful to one person who helped me with the distance healing, which is something I had this funny attachment to. The idea that when I was working with somebody in a room, I was with them. They were in a remote place that I wasn't with them in the same way. And it took a while for and some encouragement from a friend, colleague, to recognize that they actually really were uh, with me in the same ways when they're in the room as when they're halfway around the world. And so I've learned to be able to tune in, and I can do that usually essentially instantly and tune into somebody, um, be able to work with their energy very successfully. So that is a bit of an overview of the kind of work that I'm doing. Again, I always encourage people just to have in mind that if you get sick or if you get injured or if something is going on and you can't immediately overcome it, that you get in touch with me because sometimes just in one session we can get things straightened out and then the healing can take place very quickly, very thoroughly. Um, so don't hesitate to be in touch. Um, just to let you know that my next webinar will be in May, and that'll be on the 13th of May. And I don't yet have a topic for that one. If anybody has a topic they'd like to hear me present on, send me an email, dsands@partnershipforwellbeing.com. I'd love to hear suggestions for a topic. But anyway, it's been great being with you. I should check, see if there's any questions that's come up. I don't see anything in the chat. Um, so I'm going to end the recording here and we'll move on to the group clearing session.